Now we're exactly 2 weeks on from the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life. But how has this affected his campaign to become the 47th president of the United States? After years planning to face President Biden, Donald J. Trump will now be campaigning against Kamala Harris. In fresh polls taken after President Biden stepped aside, Trump and Harris are locked in a tight race, separated by just a couple of percentage points among likely voters. Well, will the gap widen over the coming months, or will this be a deeply unpredictable election? Well, the United States political analyst Dr. Roger Gewolb joins me now in the studio. Roger, it's interesting. Do you think that Team Trump saw this coming, this last-minute candidate switch?
Yeah, I'm sure they knew that Biden wouldn't last the course. He wouldn't stay the course. And I think that, they probably had to calculate and strategize. Would it be Gavin Newsom or any of the other candidates? But I don't think that Kamala was at the top of their list. And I don't think that they or anybody anticipated that she would go from being an abject last runner with a rating lower than Joe on his worst day to being the superstar she's become overnight, solely because she is a Black Asian woman. Three things which have nothing whatsoever to do with being president of the United States, but she's on the tsunami wave, especially among certain segments of the Black population and younger people, of being a hero all of a sudden, when her track record is, of course, still abysmal. And Obama and his wife didn't endorse her to the last minute with that completely cringe-making telephone call.
Why do these politicians keep doing these filmed phone calls as if they're on an episode of The Apprentice?
Because
sort of holding it out on speakerphone as if it's all such a big surprise with the camera crew there. I mean, we all know what's going on.
Because they're politicians. I mean, the late Rishi was famous for sleeve-rolled-up photo ops, wasn't he?
Yeah, no, it's interesting how they sort of try and appear so very natural, but it's all incredibly staged. I do wonder, though, because Joe Biden obviously said when he was running that he would pick a woman to be his running mate. He didn't. Did he say a woman of colour? I think he might have said a woman of colour actually to be his running mate, which really narrowed the field and meant that he had to pick Kamala Harris on identity rather than on policy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what this is all about. This is on identity, on gender and race, rather than on policy, because, her record on the border and all the other things at which she's failed is abysmal. I mean, how does a person half his age get a rating lower than he?
And yet, many vice presidents have quipped about this being, the worst job in American politics, status without power, being vice president. I mean, sure, you can preside over the Senate, but you've got no real authority to do anything at all.
It's not a bad job if you're under a doddering old man who could fall over any moment. And this is exactly what's happened here.
It's an attractive job because it's seen as a stepping stone rather than it holds any sort of power in and of itself.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it also holds power after you leave office. I mean, you certainly go to commerce and industry and wherever you want to go with a very powerful platform, having been vice president of the United States.
Now, it's worth saying that despite Kamala Harris's sort of low ratings as vice president, we have seen an uptick in her ratings since she declared, and there was this sort of extraordinary rally to Kamala effect. Part of that might be down to her campaign team. They have undoubtedly created a buzz on social media. There have been positive memes spun out of peculiar sound bites. There's this speech she gave about falling out of a coconut tree that went wildly viral, but in a strangely positive way for her.
I wouldn't give them too much credit, because I think that her comms team and her strategy team could certainly have advised her that whatever one's view of Gaza, Hamas, Israel, if you're an aspiring head of state, You don't go and spit in the face of the leader of a sovereign nation of any kind, anywhere, at any time. That was her first step, Tom, onto the stage of international affairs, was to shun Netanyahu's speech, which was a stupid thing to do, really undiplomatic, really dumb, and ill-advised. And I'm sure she had people advising her who should have said, don't do that.
It's a very difficult balancing act, of course, because there are a significant number of Democrat voters who hate the guts of Benjamin Netanyahu. And I suppose there are Democrat strategists who are worried about that flank of their party, perhaps more so than the pro-Israel side.
I don't think she would have lost those people by sitting in her seat and listening to the man's speech like everyone else. It was a gratuitous move, and I think it was fairly unintelligent and certainly very unstrategic. She didn't have to go in there and wave a flag saying, I love you, Bibi. She just had to sit there. But to publicly declare, that she wasn't going was it's reminiscent of the sort of gaffes that she's made before.
And yet there's this odd sort of parallel with 1968. Of course, there were anti-war protests then. You had LBJ, the incumbent president, at the last minute step down mid-primary. And then people sort of rushed towards what was then a contested convention. That's where the parallel ends, because this time round it's not a contested convention. It's a coronation. And for me sitting here as a journalist, I sort of think, that's a shame.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen a bit of a rough and tumble on the conference floor.
Yeah.
Do you think that they've missed a trick here by not having a contest?
Yeah, I think so. I think everybody was getting ready for a contest between 4 or 5 people, and it would have been a very good contest, and probably a better candidate would have emerged than Kamala. But I think what happened here is that they went into a panic. I mean, my personal theory is that Barack Obama, who is the worst president we've ever had, not Joe Biden.
Why do you say that?
Oh my God, because just for openers, he thought, I guess his ego drove him, he thought he could go and make friends with and appease Iran and give them some nuclear capability, and then there'd be our friends. And he's endangered the whole world, And
was he worse than William Henry Harrison?
William Henry, that's very good. You know your history. The difference is that William Henry Harrison didn't have the tools that Barack has today. And everything he did was so woke and so over the top and so against the era. The reason Putin is sitting there laughing at America is because of the things Obama did. But if I can just get back to the point very quickly, Obama, this is his 3rd term. He's been running Biden this whole time, and he wants a 4th term. And he thought he would keep Biden, active walking across the stage till he couldn't anymore. What happened is they couldn't push it any further, and then Biden said, well, I'm not going, and then Nancy Pelosi and Obama said, well, we're going to invoke the 25th Amendment, get rid of it. So he had to back down. I think this is damage limitation. They were in such a state of shock, they didn't have time to plan any of the sort of things you're talking about. They needed to do something fast, and their best bet was to make Kamala a superstar because she fits these gender and race patterns.
Well, let's see if it will work. Of course, it's a tight election, and just from a journalistic perspective, much more fun to cover an election where there's 2 points in it rather than 20 points.
Well, who's 2 points? Because if you look at the British bookies, they've still got Trump way far ahead, and I have more faith in the British bookies than I do in various polls. They've been around a long time.
Well, Dr. Roger Gewolb, thank you so much for talking through what is a fascinating United States election. Now,